Hey, Dave Melinda, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I am going to start with three questions that are going to set the stage for the next few minutes. Number one, do you want to improve your decision-making process? Okay, think about that for a second. Number two, do you want to increase your employee retention? Now, I'm sure nobody wants that, so that's probably not an important one to talk about. And the third one is, do you want to increase your project completion rates? And there were numbers attached to these, but they were so big, I didn't want to scare you off. But there's some great opportunities here. If you're interested in these, let's sit back and let's use some candor today, okay? I'm honored to be hanging out with the CEO and founder of Candor Consulting, and it's Tish Squilaro. How are you today?
I'm great, Dave. How are you?
I'm good. I'm super excited to get into this. You're a fellow author as well, Headtrash and Headtrash 2. So we got a ton of stuff to talk about. Before we do, fill us in on what's going on at Candor Consulting nowadays.
I have to say the pandemic has been terrible for everybody, but I have to admit it has offered opportunity for people like me to help bring people together in a whole different way and bring the importance of people as the strategy for a business and not just the product and the services. And so I have to say there is a silver lining that I don't know if we needed a pandemic to bring out, but quite honestly, I do think that the vast majority of all my clients have really recognized investing and being part of the inner workings of the people, or I like to call it team chemistry, has
Sure.
really been made one of the top two priorities, which I don't think it always was.
Isn't that something? And I don't know about you, but I remember when my parents were in the workforce and my dad would talk about the boss in the corner office, and all he would do is kind of bark out orders. And, everybody would, get all nervous when he walked by. And, there's amazing how much has changed since then, where people were not nearly as important as they are today. Have you done any research, or have you kind of identified why there's been that switch? Because I've always been, interested to know more about why that is.
Well, I don't have statistics, but I can give you my opinion.
Cool.
And I think a lot of it is people never were allowed in their mindset. I mean, I have parents who worked in that environment to ever ask questions or engage. It was robotic. You come in, you have a job. In some cases, you get married, you have children, or you don't have children, you have dogs or cats, and you
Yep.
just start your life in this robotic way. Over our generation and my generation and my kids, there is a lot more options and there's a lot more voices to be heard and people are trying different things, and I think because of that, the use of understanding people more and why they do stuff, how they do stuff, how to engage them to do more stuff actually became part of the job. And so today, there are some cases where we have too much say, but I do think there is a point where we at least know more about one another to actually support each other instead of being robotic and just think that we all work the same way, we all go out
Sure.
the same way. We don't, we're different.
That's a great point. And I think personally that there are a lot of people that probably scares them, because the more you get to know people, the more you realize they're not like you. And the more you realize they're not like you, the less you know what to do with them. And, we do a ton of work with this personality profiles and understanding a team from that perspective. When you're building a high performance team, what are some things that you look for? How do you start if you are sitting across from somebody and they have a great business idea and it's taking off, and they are like, oh my gosh, Tish, we need some people. I can't
We need the
wear all
right
these
people,
hats.
actually. I actually need the
Right.
right people, right? I
The
mean,
right
that's it.
people. Yeah. Hey, lately it's like if they fog a mirror, they're right. So
True.
what's your next step from that perspective?
Sure. And, we sing the same praises on behavioral profiles. I do think people get nervous when someone's not like them and automatically think it's wrong. Like
Right.
there's something wrong with that other person.
Yep.
Why aren't they thinking like me?
Or something wrong with
And
me,
it's,
right?
I have not met many that think it's them,
Really?
I have to
Okay. Yeah.
say. Oh,
Maybe
I
it's
do
just in
think
the
it's like,
Midwest. See, that's that
yeah,
thing out east. Nobody thinks that way.
our
So
East Coast seem to think pretty fondly that we have the right way to do
there
it.
you
Just
go.
ask us, right? Just ask us. We know.
Yep.
No, but
And
I
that,
do think people get a little uncomfortable when it seems different. And it's like change too. People take on change and it's always a negative at first, but change always breeds innovation and newness. Why would that be a negative? But at first, because we're uncertain. So if we're working with someone who's not like us, we become uncertain. And when
Right.
you're uncertain, you start to think, oh, what's wrong with them? And maybe there's something about me, but I don't make it about me. So the DISC profile, along with other, terrific tools out there, but I do marry myself as a business to DISC, is a terrific way to make it a very universal, neutral, and positive way to first learn about yourself. Because I do think it starts with you.
Yep.
That gets you comfortable to appreciate because you can verify, oh, this was right. I mean, DISC profiles actually sometimes are so eerie that they're so exact. I've
Right.
actually had someone say, hey, my wife read this. She wants to know who you are. You knew way too much about me. And so it can be that accurate. And when you start to get comfortable with it, because I do think the way we use these profiles is to enhance someone, not ask them to change and be something they're not.
Right.
It starts to make you comfortable to understand what others might be like. And then you start to learn and engage with people who are different in a more effective way. And so
Sure.
that's how I'd always begin ever getting to know someone. Now, I'm pretty good at it that I don't need them to take the link and the tool. I
Sure.
actually can meet someone pretty quickly and assess where they're falling within the DISC profile. So then
Nice.
I'll adjust myself to actually work with them that way because I
Okay.
want you, whoever I'm sitting across from, to know I'm there for you. So I'm not going to force you to be something you're not, but I'm going to help you unpack who you are so that if it's not working for you, we're going to have to think about alternatives. If there's
Right.
other people around you that you're having trouble with, let's find out what part you play in that. Let's not always think it's someone else. And that's usually my first step in unpacking all that.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs want to build a team like a baseball, team where they're looking for somebody that's good at third base or they're looking for somebody that's got a talent, and if they fit in, well, that's just a bonus. If they're good with people, that's an extra bonus. And I think it's just unique that now, the successful companies are starting to realize, that the people side is actually as important, if not more important, than the actual skill side. Now, granted, we wouldn't take a brain surgeon that's never done an ounce of medicine and throw him in an operating room because he gets along with everybody. There are obviously, exceptions to that. I think a lot of people really are starting to see the change of people. The culture, how do they fit in, is becoming more and more important. At least that's what I'm seeing. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well, Tish?
I am. I do think skill used to be the driver. But when you realize that four people can have all the same skills but not fit in well and be successful, you start to
Right.
realize then what is it? Why didn't it work? And I do definitely agree that behaviors and their ability to interact with others, or how I should say they interact with others, is as important. I think it's a 50-50 because my first question when someone says they're not working out is I first ask, are they capable? Because if they're not capable, there isn't anything we can help them be better at if they
Sure.
can't get the job done. So let's assume everyone's capable. Then I do look at whether or not the DNA of what is a good fit for that individual is what that company has to offer. And in all the hiring processes now, you'll see there's more behavioral type questions. They're using profiles like DISC as part of the let's get to know you better. It's not a
Right.
decision maker, but let's get to know you better.
Sure. Yep.
And it's also looking at when they're defining, which is step one, the job description. What are we looking for? So if we're looking for someone who has financial capabilities, are we also looking for someone that doesn't mind risk and isn't looking for things already structured? Because if in our stage of the company we have no processes and no structure, well, guess what? The person who knows financial information and can be in a financial role, but really like structure and infrastructure and protocols, and we have none of those, this is not a
Right.
good marriage for anybody, right?
Yep.
So I do think it is important to pay attention to that. And using a tool is probably, or a vehicle, I should call it, is
Sure.
probably one way to keep it neutral. Because what I think happens when we try to hire that baseball team, we do set out and say, I want a great catcher, I want a great pitcher. But
Right.
when we're in the interview process, we pick the people we like. And
Yep.
guess what? We
Yep.
don't even know why we like them. We just leave the meeting saying, oh, I like them.
Yep.
And so a lot of times you hire people a lot like you. So you've got all pitchers and you didn't get the catcher and you didn't get the
Right.
second base, but you've got a lot of people all alike. I think diversity among a leadership team, if we're going to talk about that, CEO,
Sure. Sure.
building his or her team
Yep.
should be diverse, should have different DNA in how they operate. Because if we hire all the same people, think of it like on a scale, it's going to be very lopsided, which means
Right.
we may be all good at one thing, but what about all those other things we're supposed to be good at? How do
Yeah.
you find those, right?
Yeah.
So I do think it's not as easy when you put the profile. It's also the actual interviewing and assessing and selecting.
Right.
We like to hire people we like because they're fun to be around or they're a lot like us, all of that
Right.
stuff about uncertainty. And then you realize, but they can't do the job because they're coming back with the same thing I would. I really wanted them to come back with something different. And
Yep.
so this is where building a team is hard,
Yeah.
and having a neutral mindset and an unemotional mindset when making those choices is probably the better decision making process for people dynamics.
Well, and that kind of blew me away when I read that you said with a strong ability to keep emotions out of the decision-making process. I mean, that right there is a talent because the vast majority of entrepreneurs and business owners are very passionate about what they do, right? And passion and emotions kind of, there's a fine line where you can get emotional very quick. And so how do you keep emotions out of that when you're helping somebody,
Hmm.
with some of these tough decisions? And again, that's where candor comes from for you. I mean, it's open, honest, and frank. So you're trying to be open with somebody, you want to be honest with them, and you want to be frank with them. There's not a lot of emotion there, but how are you able to regulate that for yourself and for
Well,
your?
I was going to say for myself first, Dave. I mean, honestly, I'm just like everyone else. I do believe we make decisions with emotion as part of the process,
Sure.
but
Okay.
it's part of the thought process, right? So I'm okay with that because, the difference between us and artificial intelligence is our emotions, is our ability to actually have feelings. And
Right.
so I would never ask people to remove emotions. However, keep them in the thought process of the decisions, right? You're allowed to have feelings then. But when you get down to making the actual decision, you've got to make sure it's clean, crisp, and clear. And the emotions don't fit in the clean, crisp, and clear categories. So
Sure.
when you go from the thought process of having your passion, having your emotions, having your insecurities, having your fear, all the things that are part of the thinking about it, when you actually pull the trigger and make that final decision, make sure the emotion didn't make the decision for you, because that's when there's regret. That's when there's poor decision choice making. That's when you make decisions without all the data. It's when all of a sudden you took the emotion and got past the thought process and had the emotion be the driver and make the actual final decision. That's the fine line. And that's how I wrote the books, because to me, it's all head trash, right? Inside our head, we have lots of things going on, and that's okay. And inside our emotions are all the things that carve out why you're Dave and I'm Tish. It's just the way we are. We are
Sure.
different people, and
Right.
people will define us by our emotions. But when I go to make a decision, I got to work hard. I mean, I use every essence of my book every day because it's a working process for all of us. How do I not make arrogance get in my way? How do I not make fear get in my way? Because I may have those feelings, but how do I make sure it isn't impeding me from actually doing the right thing? That's the fine line.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's cool because I'm actually working on my next book about business blind spots.
Huh?
And these words that you're talking about, arrogance, or these words, emotions that come into people's lives, a lot of times we don't even know we have them. There's plenty of times in my business career where I actually said to somebody, "Do you know that you're doing this right now?" And they're just like, they had no clue that they were doing what I was saying that they were doing. And so the blind spot side is really kind of got to be difficult, because if you don't see it, then how can I be responsible for it, right?
Right. And
So
you don't give it a name, right? I mean, I think if we give people, I've never met someone, if I described what was going on, they said, I don't want to do it anyway, right? It's
yeah.
usually you don't know what you don't know. So
Yep.
many times, and I say this with all the CEOs that I work with, many times they just don't know what they don't know. So let's give them the tools to know. And then if they still do it, you're right, this is not going
Right.
to work for anybody. But if we
Yep.
give them the tools, and tool number one is for at least for me, is again use the disc profile or some behavioral profile to first recognize who are you and how you
Sure.
engage with others, and then start to think about your emotions. Now my book is based on 7 that are everyday emotions that I guarantee you, if ever, I'll give you what the 7 are. It's control, it's insecurity, it's arrogance, paranoia, anger, fear, and guilt. 7 emotions that I know when I'm commuting from Philly to New York, I at least get 5 of the 7 in the first 2-hour drive. At least the 5, right?
Sure.
But
Yeah.
not all of them are going to impact me negatively, but they'll be there. The key of understanding your emotions is to recognize which ones cross the line for me. And mine were anger and guilt, believe it or not,
Okay.
which I even found hard to digest. But as I unpacked what anger is, which is I don't like no, and I respond and react very quickly, which is not very good,
Sure.
or guilt, where I love to, manipulate in a nice way things to get done. You have to use a little guilt to get that done, right? It's my way of actually getting through stuff. And
Sure.
so I agree with you. If you don't know what it is, what are you going to do? So if
Yeah.
people are curious about at least the 7 I have, you can go to my website, which is headtrash911.com, headtrash911.com. Not very easy to remember. And I
Sure.
give you the opportunity to take what I call the Head Trash Index. It
Okay.
is a free online multiple choice questionnaire. At the end, maybe 10, 15 minutes it takes, you're going to get all 7 with a numerical score, how you scored
Okay.
on all 7. And the
Okay.
top 2 are going to pop up as your head trash cocktail. So you'll know which of the 2 that if you're going to read the book or ever think about what emotions cross the line for you, it's those 2. And I actually describe a little bit how you should be thinking about that. And that's just generically to anyone who wants to take it, because you're
Awesome.
right. Uncovering it to identify it is step 1.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely put that in the show notes. Headtrash911.com. So I wrote one of your first one down, control, because I have to be like completely vulnerable here and say I never really considered it as an emotion. I
Mm.
considered it more as a behavior. And, again, I think a lot of entrepreneurs control things because that's why they're in business for themselves. So they can control whatever they need to control in their
I
life.
thought it would have been mine, and it wasn't. I was actually shocked when I created the algorithm for the head trash index.
Sure.
I thought for sure I would have control and arrogance as the top 2. And so I did a big focus group with about 15 people in it who knew me because they were all my friends and family. And
Okay.
I said, let's all take the index and see if it's accurate. And outcome for me, anger and guilt. And I said, hey guys, listen, I'm going to toss this. I got to go back and redo it. And my husband happened to be in this
No,
session
you
with us.
don't.
He says, why are you saying that? I don't
Yeah,
understand. I
that's
think mine is
awesome.
perfectly accurate. I go, I got
Yeah.
anger and guilt. He goes, it's perfect for you.
Oh, wow.
So funny
Yeah.
enough, it is one of those things that we are not always self-aware.
Yep.
Control is when it's healthy, Dave, and I think it's important that we all understand that many of these emotions, all of the emotions, when they're healthy, are what make us who we are. So a healthy control is boundaries, is protocols, is confidence in knowing that you have a way to do something and it works
Okay.
and you want the best for everybody. And so many times you think you're helping people by doing it for them or micromanaging them
Sure.
or
Sure.
only giving them pieces of information because only you can know it all. You are the only one who can handle it. Well, those examples are crossing the line. You're becoming controlling, a micromanager. And what does that happen to someone working with you or living with you? You become a zombie. You don't even think for yourself anymore. And so, one of the first tips I give someone who's looking at control as gone off the rails and went from healthy to I've got protocols and boundaries and everybody knows what they're supposed to do to, oh my God, I'm a micromanager and nobody wants to stay here, is I talk about delegating, because
Yep.
the number one fix in letting someone release a little control is to think about it from a delegating action. That's
Sure.
the activity, the delegating. And the
Yep.
tip is make a column and put China and Tupperware on top. Put everything that's China in your business. And what is China like? If it falls, it shatters, it's over. So put everything in your business that if you delegated it and it fell apart, you might as well put the sign closed for good on the front door. Then you got your Tupperware list. But you know what? If it didn't go perfectly, if it fell to the ground, you could pick
Sure.
it back up and use it. The worst thing about Tupperware is the covers leave. I don't know where they go, but you can never find the Tupperware cover, right?
Right next to the
But it's
socks.
but it still works. So
Yep.
as people started to think about options of delegating, you start to rationalize, could everything be China?
Yeah.
Could everything that I do only have to be done by me or else?
Sure.
It starts to relieve the feeling that I could let others do stuff. It may not look like I do it. It may not come out as quickly as I did it, but someone else did it. That's how you take the head trash control out of the way.
Wow. So what inspired you to write these books?
It's a funny story. I'm not even a book reader. My husband jokes, "How did you write a book? You
Oh
can't
my
even
gosh.
finish a book without falling asleep." Because what
Yeah.
happens is I'm a person always on the move. And
Yeah.
so unless I'm being read the book to, I fall asleep after the first chapter.
Okay.
I said to, but I'm such a person who loves to like overdo. And when I was working with a client, I happened to be collaborating with another consultant. And I said, God, what is wrong with Steve? Why do we get to the final stage and he knows exactly what to do? And then he freezes. He says, it's the head trash. I said, oh my God, I love that. He
Yeah.
goes, well, that's what it is. It's all this stuff in his head. And I
Yeah.
think it just stops him. And and he had fear as a head trash, by the way, once we diagnosed it. I said to my colleague, Tim, who I actually wrote the book with or books with, I said, Tim, we got to write a book about that. He says, well, what do you know about book writing? I said, nothing, but I love the idea. 2.5 years after that meeting that he and I had, we published Head Trash.
That's awesome.
And that's why we wrote it.
And then there's Head Trash 2. So there wasn't just enough for one. So the Head Trash, the first one says cleaning out the junk that stands between you and success. So that seemed like it was more of a self-discovery type of book.
Yeah, it's self-discovery, and it also is, well, launching the topic, right? So you don't know anything about this. So it is uncovering what is head trash because
Sure.
we made it up. I don't think if you look it up, actually it's our term and our definition of it. But
Okay.
it's also a way to actually self-reflect. So it is for you, and it is very much in a business setting. But when I was talking and promoting head trash on TV and radio, and I kept getting the same question, well, what if I don't have head trash, but someone else does? I was like, well, I've never met someone that didn't have it, but maybe
There
you're
you go.
special. But it really begged the question of, well, I may be able to manage my own, but suppose I
Sure.
live with or
Yep.
work with someone that has it. So the second book was, how do you manage the trash of someone else
Sure.
or recognize the trash of someone else? And in the second one, it actually takes it a little bit more outside the business zone. It still can be considered
Sure.
business available, but I actually made it life because I think, life has a ton of relationships that have a lot of trash. And
Sure.
so some of the examples in the book and some of the things that I'll reference are family stories because everything in both books, real life stories. We took out names, we took out companies, we took
Sure.
out if it was a sibling, the true value,
Sure.
but they're
Sure.
all real examples because the only way I've ever learned to help someone learn something is by giving them an example. So
Sure.
everything in both books is real examples.
Nice. Well, and so are people buying the second one more than the first because the second one, it's easier to blame somebody else, right? And start looking at other people than looking internally. So if I was sitting there at the bookstore and they were both there, I would probably lean towards the second one first to try and, not that you should, but I think it's funny that part of it is your own, it's much easier to investigate and to put the magnifying glass on other people than it is on yourself. So do you tend to see CEOs struggling with that high EQ piece, the self-discovery? Do you tend to get some resistance on that?
Well, from the book question, they came out 3.5 years apart, so
Oh,
kind of
gotcha.
hard to say. They didn't
Sure.
come out together,
Okay.
but I do think the second book sold pretty quick for the
Yeah,
reasons of I don't have it, but someone else does.
exactly.
But what
Exactly.
we built in the second book, I still have you take a look at yourself. I still go
Okay.
back to you. I don't just
Good.
reference others.
Good.
But from the just working with CEOs, I have to say more than 75% of my first conversations, I'm hearing about how everyone else is the problem and
Yep.
they don't understand what's wrong with everyone. And by the time I get, involved, I understand, well, they may not be the biggest part of the problem, but they are definitely
Sure.
part of the problem. So I do think it's hard to put yourself in that predicament when you're first thinking about everything not working to
Right.
ever say, gee, it's probably me.
Yeah.
So they do come at it from, hey, I got a team. There's a problem with them. Can you go see what's wrong? I'm
Yeah.
ready to get rid of them all. I'm like, okay. I immediately know then you're
Yeah.
probably a big part of this problem. But I
Yep.
say, let me take a look and meet everybody and see what happens.
Definitely. Yeah, I work with a lot of sales professionals, and it's I've heard everybody's excuse. It's the government's fault, it's the competitor's fault, it's the customer's fault, it's the economy, it's the industry. I mean, you hear them all, and very rarely. And I'm curious on your end, Tish, but on our end, very rarely are people fessing up and saying, "Man, this is on me." I wish that we would have that more open dialogue, and I think it's some of the EQ, that emotional quotient, that we don't have that self-awareness that we really have limitations, and they might be really hindering where this is going. Just like you said, it's
Mm.
easy to say, hey, I got this team, they're like the misfit toys, go fix them and let me know when you're done and send me a bill. I mean, that would be like, if you'd have a line out the door for people waiting to get to you
I
to
always
fix.
say, yeah, it's not a pill I give everybody and they wake
Yeah,
up and everybody's better. I wish it were that simple.
exactly.
Well, it's funny. I related to my first business, which had nothing to do with people. It was a dog daycare and boarding called Doggy World Daycare back in 1996, way before its time. But we built the business to have all of the amenities that a spa would have or a daycare would have
Okay.
for but dogs though. In it was a dog trainer. And I was like, "Oh, this is great. We can have everybody send their dog and you train them." And the dog trainer says, "No, no, no. The owners have to come. I can't. It's not just the dog. It's the owner who has to manage it, right?" So it's
Drop them
very
off for the
simple.
weekend, right?
And then have them come back, wonderful children, and then we're all good to
Exactly.
go, right?
Absolutely.
So it is about self, and I do think it's easier and feels better to blame. Think
Yep.
about it. I mean,
Yep.
we all want to feel good because maybe life around us doesn't help us feel good. So the best way to feel good is blame everybody else on the problems, and we actually can think it's not us. So I do think it's a default of human nature.
Right.
I've never met someone that I work with who, at the onset of us working together, didn't eventually realize, oh my gosh, I play a part in this. So I do think again, it's about the what I didn't know, right? You
Yep.
unpack it, you understand it, and you can digest it better. But even I'm a culprit of it. So much easier to blame my teenagers for everything than to think actually my parenting wasn't the right thing to do. So
Well, I'm an only child, so I was like there was no question on who did it. So, when you're growing up as an only child, man, it's pretty simple that if something's broke, we know where that happened. But I think empathy is a word that's I'm hearing more and more in leadership circles. I'm hearing more and more of it in leadership training, in leadership discussions. So I'm curious if you're hearing that as well on the East Coast, that there's, more attention to empathy, trying to understand, put myself in the place of my team, put myself in the place of my customer, and my trade partners, vendors, whatever that is. I'm just curious if that word's showing up more for you guys as well.
I think it is. I get concerned though it's used very loosely and it's
Right.
used very frequently.
Yep.
And it doesn't solve anything by just using the word. I
Right.
really do think it's about listening and patience. And that's what I feel like I help people with. And those are as important as having empathy. Because to have empathy, you have to listen to others and not be doing all the talking. You have to have the patience to allow actually stuff to unfold. And if that's how you're defining empathy, then I'm all with it. But empathy isn't just caring and having sympathy,
Right.
because that sometimes is patronizing, that sometimes is enabling, and that
Right.
doesn't work out for anybody. So
Right.
I'm
Yep.
very cautious when I'm helping a company that uses empathy as the answer. I think it's really to unpack how we're behaving,
Right.
and you want to do it with thoughtfulness and patience and good listening, and that'll produce an empathy culture. But
Sure.
empathy itself, I don't even know what we're defining.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think empathy, at least from what I see, I don't see empathy as the end result. It's kind of the beginning. It's the attitude, and then there's next steps to be able to, if I can understand what you're going through, if we're on a team together and I can understand what you're going through, that's one thing. But then again, the extra credit or the cherry on top is really then to be able to come alongside you and find ways to turn that empathy into something, like you said, that's helpful, that's going to create something that's
Or
going to.
support, right? I mean,
Exactly.
be supportive. I mean, let's take the disc profile for a second, because it's something you appreciate as well. When you find out what is easier for someone to relate to, and that's actually not easy for you, but the stuff that's hard for them, it comes easier. Why
Right.
wouldn't you support and compliment that person instead of finger pointing and saying, well, you're just not good at that, you better get better at it? No, the key about building team chemistry is to make sure that you recognize what doesn't come easily to a colleague, and then you, who actually it does come easier to, support and compliment them.
Right.
And that's how I use the team dynamics when I work with DISC, is because we're going to get people that are very good at being, entrepreneurial. And then we're going to get people who are very good at being very structured and routine. How do
Right.
you marry the two? Well, the people who are structured and organized shouldn't be, using words like radical and impulsive to the entrepreneur.
Right.
Instead, they might want to balance it by bringing some sort of balance with a process or a roadmap. And then
Yeah.
someone who's very entrepreneurial shouldn't poo poo the word system or process and think it's like kryptonite to Superman,
Yep.
because actually, those wonderful ideas you want won't scale without some process. So it's actually learning how to support and complement versus finger point and blame.
Yeah. Well, and since 1991, I've pretty much owned my own businesses. And it's a situation where I hear the word structure and there's a little bit of a chemical released in my brain and I start to resist it like immediately. And the other word that kills me is process, because I immediately think of a 42 point, spreadsheet, and it just like puts me over the edge, right? So what I've learned for myself is that the word path is a
Mhm.
much more safe word, much more energetic word. I like the path rather than the process. Tomato, tomato, right? I'm learning as I grow older that there are words that people can't handle,
Mhm.
and there are words that people really embrace. And based on your behavioral style, you'll be able to determine those words. Like for me, again, process is not a word. If you use that on a consistent basis, or structure, I am in business for myself because I hate structure. I don't just dislike it, I hate it because it's
Right.
so, I think of it, and I think of like the companies that say, Tish, that's just how we do it around here, we've done it this
Right.
way for the last 100 years, we're going to do it this way for the next 100 years. And my thought comes in of, that's what Blockbuster said, that's what Kmart said, that's what Sears said, that's what Kodak, all these giant companies just kept thinking this is the way we do it. And unfortunately, it really didn't work for them. And not that I'm right and they're wrong. I just am trying to find other ways to use words that people can appreciate. So, have you identified any words for yourself that are like you struggle with?
Oh, absolutely. So from the disc
Yep.
phenomenon, I'm probably much like you, Dave. I'm a very high D.
Yep.
And I've been in my own business since I graduated college. I've never gotten a paycheck from someone that I didn't foster. I've
Sure.
always worked for myself.
Yep.
And I think that gives me resilience and resourcefulness to be that way, but it also makes me impatient. And I hate structure. I actually hate the word Excel. My husband is a C
All
on the
right.
disc.
Oh
And
no.
so,
How
but
did
we
you end up
actually,
with this? Oh my gosh. Wait a
What's
minute
funny
here.
enough, he's a CD, so it
Time
does
out.
work. I'm a
Oh my
DI,
God.
but when he says, "Let me get the Excel spreadsheet," I start to get hives. I mean, he could even say, "Hey, I put our vacation in an Excel," and I really get like uncomfortable.
It's already not a
So
vacation
it's
anymore.
already became a spreadsheet. I'm like, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, don't put our vacation on an Excel," but
Uh,
that's how he likes to look at it. So I use the word roadmap, right? So
oh,
to
great.
me, like
Okay.
you came up with path,
Yeah. Yeah.
I use that word for myself
Sure.
because process and structure seems confining to me and I
Sure.
feel caged then. And it's not really how I should look at it, but I am who I am. And
Sure.
so I always use the word roadmap. So I say, what's our roadmap for the holiday trip?
Yeah.
What is our plan? When is dinner? When is this? And I love looking at the roadmap. Don't tell me Excel.
Sure.
And I do find working with different CEOs or any person I work with all levels. So it's not
Yeah.
just the CEO.
Yeah.
I do think I have to get them comfortable with sharing what ticks them off because it is who we are, and
Right.
then using alternatives to help them embrace it. Because I want you to embrace stuff. I need to embrace scale, right? My D is a 97, my I is a 93, my S and C are 4 and 5. I can't scale by
You and
myself.
I
I'm a
are
mess,
like together. That's awesome.
right? So if anyone out there who understands disc, I mean, my graph is two very high things and
Yep.
almost non-existent on the other.
Yes.
But I
How come I don't see
realized
you at the meetings, Tish? I don't see you at the high D, high I meetings.
I must be missing them because I'm not focused, which is
Yeah.
my biggest
You don't
problem,
have
right?
time for. I'm too busy doing other stuff. I
I
get it.
send my S's and C's to take notes. But no, I miss out though. Look, I've been
Yeah.
in my business for 22 years
Sure.
and I have a lovely, boutique like business. But when I want to scale,
Yeah.
I just create new. So I wrote
Sure.
books to
Yep.
scale. When
Yep.
I create new, I build a digital learning platform, which I call the roadmap. I do new things, but I never sat back and said, you know what? I'm going to plot my first 3 years. I'm going to do these things. And then I'm going to grow into this and this. I might have had a much more calm route for myself
Yep.
if I did that instead of the sporadic craziness. But I've also learned I love it. And so I have to do what's also works for me. That's why when I'm working with someone and coaching them, I'm not looking to change them to fit something they can't be,
Right.
but I am going to give them alternative ways of looking at some of the boundaries and protocols they still need to do in the terms to which are going to work for them because they're out there.
Absolutely. Well, and my assessment says I get bored really easy. So that's why I have to have these multiple things going on at once. I want to. It's not that I have to, I want to. I couldn't imagine coming into an office every day, sitting at a cubicle for 8 hours a day for 50 weeks a year, living for those 2 weeks of vacation. And if you're listening and that's you and you enjoy that, that's awesome. Just the way I'm built, I couldn't do that.
Well, it
There's no,
doesn't give you energy. It's about energy, right? I mean, it
yeah,
really is.
absolutely.
I'll be on vacation planning the next one. That my husband will say, "Can we just enjoy this vacation?" I go, "I know, but we got to think about the next one." I'm very similar, but that actually pleases me. So that's okay. It's
Wow.
whatever gives each person their energy
Yep.
to perform and
Yep.
excel. We just have to make sure it's not crushing someone else. That's the key, is
Right.
that your energy can't ruin it for someone else. So I may not tell my husband all the things I'm planning up here until I've actually said, "Hey, what do you want to do for the next one?" He looks over and goes, "You've already got it planned already. I'm not even going to tell me when we're ready to go."
Let me know where to be and when. Well, so, and as we start to come in for landing today, I was just curious about, does the word roadmap to your husband, does that resonate with him? Is he cool with that word? Or is that something that he had to kind of start moving his way and you moved, he moved your way and you moved his way, so to speak?
Yeah, well, funny enough, because he's a C, which loves structure, a
Yeah.
roadmap was heaven. I
Yeah.
would not, I mean, I had to find something that worked because I'm much more in the moment. And
Sure.
so I think that would make him nervous.
Yep.
Like when we first got married, he goes, "Look, I knew I would have a seatbelt on always. It's always bumpy and fun, but I don't
Sure.
take that seatbelt off. I just
Yeah.
know."
Yeah.
But he had to choose that. So a lot of times when I'm working with teams, I'm realistic about the leader and say the leader works like this. Now
Yep.
we're gonna tweak and refine so that everybody can collaborate and work well together. But the
Sure.
truth is that leader is not going to change that much that you should take your seatbelt off if you want to wear a seatbelt knot, right? So you do have to describe the environment in realistic terms. And I think that's why people like working with me, is
Sure.
that the candor approach comes through in everything I do and say when I'm helping you as an individual or you as an individual in a business. I'm going to do the real talk because we don't have time for not to deal with that stuff. That's why you want someone to be neutral but honest with you.
So, because I know for me, when I start a relationship with a new client, that's one of my questions is, and I don't use the word candor. I just say, how real do you want to get? I mean, is this a situation where there's things that are off, off the reservation we can't talk about? Is this where this group is here regardless? Or is everything open, to discuss and get as deep as we need to get? Do you have that similar scenario, or how do you, bring the candor piece into this so that they know what they're getting themselves into?
Well, I don't definitely define it in my first two sessions. I give them a chance to be themselves. I
Okay,
feel like if I ask them some specific questions like that, I'm going to get the answer they think they're supposed to give me, which is
sure,
probably not really the answer, in my
sure,
opinion, their real
sure.
answer. I
Yep.
also like to give them time to in the dating stage when they're getting to know me. I
Mhm.
always say, why don't you tell me what's on your mind that's bothering you? Let's talk about it. You didn't engage me yet. Let me work with you for a second on how I would look at it. This is how I talk about it. This is how I'd come at it. If you like that approach, you're going to love working together. If it's not exactly what you're ready for, then maybe making the choice for someone like me, or we can have that conversation with, I'm not ready for that, but at least you'll know. So I do give them an opportunity.
That's awesome.
And as I'm getting to know them, I'll kind of know first. So
Cool.
I'll kind of have my radar up.
Good deal. Well, hey, I got two questions and then I'm gonna let you go because high D's are like, you're already chomping at the bit to get onto your next thing. So, what's Tish's tip of the week for anyone listening now?
I would say resourcefulness. And I
Okay.
and I think a lot of us have grown some over the last 18 months, but be resourceful and not accepting the status quo or thinking that you can only do this so far. I think you have to be a little resourceful and figure it out. There's always a way. And I'm a big fan of no the first time never means it's no. Give yourself a chance to be resourceful to figure something out.
That's awesome. And what we do is we come alongside people that can't figure things out. So if you're struggling with that thing, that's why Tish and I are here to be able to help. It's always good to have a different perspective. I love the resourcefulness. We are all created with a ton of opportunity. There's just times that, a pitcher can't be a catcher. And so that's why you have somebody come along, or you have a batting coach. I mean, I'm shocked that somebody like Tiger Woods would have as many coaches as he had. You'd think he'd just walk up, naturally hit a ball 300 yards and, life would be good. But he had all these people around him helping him with his blind spots. And so, that's why we're here. So thanks for sharing that tip. So the tough question of the day is, what's one thing that most people don't know about you that you feel comfortable sharing?
Wow. Hmm. Something uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
I guess, you know what? I think because I wrote books about managing your emotions, you would think I'm really good at it.
Okay.
And I just dropped my first child off at college, and I'm not so good at it, right? You do not realize the big change in your life. Again, I
Sure.
do this for a living, change management. But
Yeah.
when you have someone that you're with for 18 years and you almost know every little thing about them, and
Yep.
then in an hour from when you let them off to you go to wherever you're going to go home, you realize the world has changed forever.
Yep.
I'm still managing my emotions on how I feel and how numb I am. And I'm not a numb person.
Sure.
And so that means even people who think they're so strong, um, we're all people inside and have feelings, and I'm struggling with it.
Wow.
So,
Thanks for sharing. We just actually lost my dad about 60 days, not even 40, about a month and a half ago. And he lived in San Diego, and we still have this thought, the numbness there, but you still kind of think, hey, he's there. You don't really come to grips with it right away. So, if you can't come to grips with it, just think she's at the mall. She'll be home in 20 minutes.
she's happy as a clam,
Yeah,
and I think she's
exactly.
actually built her whole new world already. But the emptiness of loss, and I am
Yeah.
so sorry to hear about your dad, but the emptiness of loss, we all heal differently. As a D, I wanted to be done. I thought
Yeah.
after one day I would be fine. And it's 3 weeks later, and there are
Yeah.
still times I walk past her room and I cry. I'm like, what is
Yeah.
wrong with me?
Yeah.
So the
Exactly.
healing process, again, it's that resourcefulness, right? The
Yeah.
healing process for all of us is becoming self-aware we have it, and then just working through it. And sometimes it doesn't happen as fast as we think.
Yep.
Stick with it, get through it. I'm sure I have a second one going soon, right? Another year.
Oh,
I'll be much better with that one. I'm still figuring out this one. It is the truth. It's not that
awesome.
easy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for being vulnerable. So if somebody's listening today and this kind of sparked something in them where they either want to learn more about your book, they want to learn more about, your consulting practice, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
I'm always available. So I would like to say my phone number, which is 610-613-4864, because people live by text and
Sure.
WhatsApp today. So
Sure.
I do think if you want me instantly, I will respond. My website is Headtrash. Well, there's two. There's candor-consulting.com, which you can learn
Okay.
all about me. There's
Yep.
also Headtrash 911, which is mainly the books, but also the index for you to take, which is free. But truly, I mean, between my cell phone, which I just gave you, which is always a textable thing,
Sure.
and my website, I'm one of those people that I hear from you. I don't care where it is or when it is. Within a couple of hours, you'll get some note back from me.
Awesome. Well, and if that's you, if something did kind of spark inside of you and maybe, there's a little hope inside, maybe there's some new energy, rather than just go back to what you were doing, take her up on her offer. I mean, it's not often that you get access to somebody like Tish. And so she's, making herself available to you. It might be 15 minutes, but there might be some little piece that changes your life. And so rather than just pretend that you're fine and go back to the way it was, if something really was resonating with what she said, I just want to encourage you to do the hardest thing and even make it simpler in text. You don't even have to call. You can start with a text. There's email on her LinkedIn site. I mean, there are so many ways to get a hold of people. I just encourage you. We do this show every week for this exact reason, because we want you to, be connected with somebody that's going to help. And then it's such a great time learning about a bunch of stuff. And again, whether it's employee retention, whether it's your decision-making process, whatever it is that we talked about, if it's something that you feel is just not right for you, please, I encourage you. It doesn't cost you anything. Maybe you want to start with the headtrash911.com, but just do something. Be intentional with this, and you will be so happy that you did. So I'm so honored, Tish, that you spent some time with us. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I'm taking the Headtrash 911 here shortly, so you'll see me come through. So you'll be able to be like, oh my gosh, there he is.
I
I'm
bet I already
excited.
figured you out, Dave.
I'm
But
sure
thank
you
you
did.
so
I'm
much for
sure you did.
having me.
Absolutely. So hey, when you see it, then you tell me, write them down, and you tell me if they match what I do. And I
I will
promise
do that.
I'll be as vulnerable on that as I can. So again, thank you so much for hanging out with us, Tish. And I know you speak a lot, so I'd love to share a stage with you somewhere. And until we talk again, again, thanks for hanging out with us, Tish. And thanks everybody for listening. And please just do yourself a favor and just reach out to her, and she'll be more than happy to help. So until next week, have a great week.